Rav Soloveitchik had a very adamant position in regards to interfaith religious dialogue, against interfaith religious dialogue. Yet, I think you bring in the book that he had personal discussions regarding the issues of faith with Cardinal Willebrands. Why and how do you understand that?
Okay, so we go back to Pope John the 24th, if I'm not mistaken, 1963. You have the Ecumenical Council, and there the Pope actually makes some very, very important statements, theological statements about Christianity, that the church does not hold our generation's Jews responsible for the crucifixion. So, we got up and we said, shkoyach, thank you very much. But the fact that millions of Jews were slaughtered in the last 2,000 years because they actually did. But all right, it's what the Gemara calls modeh b'miktzat. He came around a little bit. So the Pope invites Jewish leaders to the Vatican to discuss theology and to see where we have some meeting grounds and meeting points for discussion. The Rav writes an article that year, it was published in 1964 in Tradition, called Confrontation, where he strongly advises against joining those discussions at the Vatican. The Rav's position was totally adopted by the entire Orthodox camp. There was even a Lubavitcher Rebbe at the time wanted to put something down in writing, and he got a hold of the Rav's article, Confrontation. And on stationery of 770 Eastern Parkway of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, they reprint the Rav's article with the Rav's name, of course, with the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the end signing, I agree with all the affirmation, everything all above. Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Like, why bother, create the wheel a second time? It's been said so eloquently, and the Rebbe agreed with every word that the Rav said, and he publishes it on 770 stationery. The Reform movement did send delegates, and the conservative movement were split. Some did, some don't. That's a conservative movement has its right wing, its left wing, its centrist as well. And that was the case. So it was a moot issue after the 1964 article of Confrontation. In the years that I drove the Rav in 74, 75, I came across an article in the Yiddish newspaper, Allgemeine Journal. And they reported that several years earlier, it did not have a date, that the Rav had a conversation with a cardinal on religious matters. And I questioned the Rav in the car. I said, Rabbi, how does this sit with the article of Confrontation? And the Rav said something very interesting. So first of all, I had to figure out in my own research which cardinal it was, because I knew there was a Cardinal Cushing and a Cardinal Spellman. One was in New York, one was Boston. I didn't exactly know which cardinal it was. I know there's a baseball team, the St. Louis Cardinals, but I figured it wasn't them either. So who was it? So I went to my primary source for investigation, Rabbeinu Google Shlita, and on Google, I was able to come up with this Cardinal Willebrands, a Dutch cardinal, who in a speech in 1985 reports to a Vatican committee about the meeting he had with Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik in 1971 in a New York hotel, and he quotes from that discussion. So that happened. There's no question that the meeting happened. And the Rav told me that in Confrontation article, I was talking public policy. I didn't want that the Jewish organization should officially be represented and something would come out of it. The Rav also smelled a little bit some missionary activity that might be behind the invitation of the Pope. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. On the other hand, on a very, very private level, the Rav felt that there is some value in having a rabbi of his own stature meet up with a leader of another religion of a great stature as well. But they have to be met on the level that they are acquainted with each other, not just personally, but also in terms of the subject matter. The Rav told me, in order to sit with a Christian religious leader, you have to know Christianity. And he says, how many of the Gedolei Yisrael, how many of the great Torah giants of the day know Christianity as well as I do? This is what the Rav says. I mean, just think for a second. Do you think Rav Moshe Feinstein could have sat and dialogued with I'm sure he would not be able. It's not like in the days of the Ramban, where in 12th and 13th century, where he deals with the Pablo Christianity disputations, where obviously the Ramban knew Christianity through and through. The Rav did know. The Rav was well read. He knew cultures of the world very, very deeply and was able to make that assessment. So he felt on a private, personal level, he wanted to have some insight of what the Christian leader had in mind, and he was willing to share some things with that person. But this was not publicized at the day. Mind you, this went public years later. And the Rav said it was a private conversation, and it's like off the record type of thing. I felt I could do it. But on the question of the Rav saying, testifying about himself, how many of the Gedolei Israel know Christianity as well as I do? He's making a statement that he believes that he belongs to the category of Gedolei Israel. And that's interesting in itself, because the Rav once talked about humility. And he talked about the verse of Moshe Rabbeinu, where it says, Aish Moshe anav b'kol adam. Moses was the greatest humble person in the world. So what does that mean? He thought he was nothing, afar ve'efer, just the dust of the ground? No. The Rav said, Moshe said, anava, humility means a correct self-assessment. You're not greater than you are, but you're also not lower than when you are. Because if you have great talents and abilities, and there's something to be done, and we need a responsible person who's capable, and you shy away because of this humility, no, it's not for me, I'm not such a great person, blah, 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 blah. The Rav said that's shirking responsibility. You were given those talents so that you can use them. And if you're a great person, you have to utilize that greatness. And the Rav felt that Moshe Rabbeinu knew exactly who Moshe Rabbeinu was. He said Rabbi Akiva knew who Rabbi Akiva was, the Rambam knew who the Rambam was, and I know who I am. It was an amazing comment. And this was not something that we would say in the Hebrew slang, a shvitza, somebody who's bragging. He was not bragging. He was telling us what he felt was authentic humility, that he understood who he was. And therefore he felt sometimes he had obligations to talk to people and so on, and he did it.